And I'll be briefer on this one, but this really does come from the same origin. Most of you know that I served on a community college board in the past, and when we were taking a look at workforce housing, there wasn't much land available for us to do that, so we started to take a look at air rights. And so what we're continuing to look at currently is the ability to build upward when we don't have the ability when we don't have the land to continue to develop. And specifically what AB 2208 does, it would require when local governments update their housing element that they specifically consider the existence of air rights and underutilized property as potential placements for future affordable housing. And this is something I think that would work in particularly districts where you don't have the availability to have more land to develop affordable housing. That really just is the origin of that. And I respectfully would ask for your aye vote, and we have one witness here that will also be brief. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure thing.
Mr. Chair and members, Sean Topakian on behalf of the California Apartment Association. We're obviously in support. We think, as we all know, California is facing a significant housing crisis, and the main reason behind that is a lack of housing supply, both market rate and affordable. This bill gets at a very creative, extremely creative way of increasing supply that will ultimately help all of our communities.
Margot Parks, the California Council for Affordable Housing, in support of the bill. Apologies again for no letter on this issue, but again, want to thank the author for being creative and would echo the comments made by the Apartment Association. It's just another creative way to look at the potential for affordable housing in the state, and would encourage your aye vote.
Any other supporters? Any opponents?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Lauren De Valencia, again representing the American Planning Association. And we do appreciate the author's efforts to look at different and more creative ways of finding housing, but we must respectfully oppose this approach. The requirement to assess the potential addition of housing on top of existing public facilities simply isn't viable. In order to add additional floors to existing operating public facilities, it must be built with the knowledge or the potential of adding that additional housing so that the structure meets code requirements to carry the weight and height of that added housing development. Other than single-family homes, our planners haven't seen any significant additions to floors to existing buildings and don't believe that it would be easy to do so. And we don't object to the bill's requirement that the inventory of sites include a review of underutilized sites to determine if they're viable for housing development. However, we just want to note that it may not result in any additional housing depending on when the current site is available and when it might be, available for development. We do agree with the analysis. These potential sites could be included to meet regional housing needs, but may not have the potential to be, developed within the planning period. We would be happy to work with the author on this bill further, but can't support the bill as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Questions from the committee? Mr. Steinworth.
Well, I do have a question for the opposition, if she would join us back at the table. Thanks. It's my understanding that this legislation is not a mandate. It's not requiring. It's just giving an option and a tool. So to your point about the properties not having been built to be able to withstand the weight of the additional floors, that is something that, of course, that property is not required to have to take that. But should a property go ahead and decide to be retrofitted, be it we know that we're doing quite a few seismic retrofits, but to be able to withstand the weight of that gives this landlord or the owner of this property, the developer, the opportunity to possibly build it up higher than what it was initially intended for.
Sure. I think, for us, the idea, though, if you're going to be able to include it within your regional housing needs assessment, it's important that there is really viability there to be able to count that. So I think that's the concern for us.
But it is still possibly a potential for some properties, and this is just a tool to be able to try and support that.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, I have a comment for the author. I think this is very clever. Again, I think that these are very unique approaches, and I'd like to respectfully ask to be added as a co-author for this.
Of course.
Okay, any further questions? Mr. Santiago, you may close.
I have it.
Oh, Ms. Lopez.
Mr. Santiago, I'm planning to support this bill, but I have some issues in my district that I want to discuss with you maybe in the near future, because before I support it full, I'm going to vote this time, but I hope we can sit together and discuss those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any urgent questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them now.
No, it's more specific.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're close.
I respectfully would ask for your aye vote.
Okay. Want to thank you for agreeing to accept the amendment. Actually, no, I'm sorry. There are no amendments on this one. I jumped to the next one. I want to thank you for your flawless law, which I'm happy to support. And I also agree that it's a creative approach as we look for the various spaces around our cities and counties to build more housing. With that, I have a do pass recommendation to the next committee. It was moved by Mr. Steiner, seconded by Ms. Lopez. If we could call the roll.
Motion to pass and refer to the Committee on Local Government. Chu.
Aye.
Chu, aye. Steinорth. Aye. Steinорth, aye. Burke. Aye. Burke, aye. Chow. Aye. Chow, aye. Gaines. Lopez. Aye. Lopez, aye. Mullen.
That bill's out. And last but certainly not least, going now to file item number 2, AB 2200. Mr. Thurman, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. It's an honor to be before you to present AB 2200, a bill that would create housing for school employees, as we affectionately call it, a teacher housing bill. Recognizing that we are experiencing major affordability challenges in the state of California, this bill seeks to create the ability for school districts to create affordable housing for the folks who educate our kids. In many ways, this bill is a 2-for-1. It addresses affordability issues, and at the same time, it creates a way to help us address and close the achievement gap. We know that we're experiencing a crisis in recruiting and retaining teachers. And so this bill says that for those districts that are impacted in a way where they can't keep teachers, in large part because of housing costs, that this is a product that will help those school districts. In one of the school districts that is in my assembly district, we'd heard that last year alone, they had to replace 200 teachers. When they did the exit interview with those teachers, they asked them, what was it that caused you to leave? The single most common answer was that I couldn't afford to work to live where I teach. This bill gives an opportunity to help correct that, and it specifies that districts have to already have access to the land and have a nexus to students who need additional support to help close the achievement gap. We've got two great witnesses here today who want to add context to what we're attempting to do. They are Claudia Capio from the City of Oakland, and we have another witness from one of our districts who will speak, as well as Ted Chandler from the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. Through the chair, I would turn it over to Ms. Capio.
Ms. Capio, good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm the Assistant City Administrator for the City of Oakland, and just to be right there, we have very, very bad housing context in Oakland. We have many parts of the state, as in many parts of the state, experiencing exceedingly high demand. The supply has not kept in pace with that demand, even though our building permits and building activity are at a historic high. This has created a huge rent crunch, particularly at the lower levels of the income scale. An average two-bedroom apartment right now is approximately $2,950. That's a 40% increase in a year. We're within the top 5 cities in the nation that have experienced that type of rental increase, and there's a growing and serious gap between the people who are living in Oakland or who want to live in Oakland and their incomes, and then the ability of those folks to pay median rents. Some important workers in our community, as the Assembly member has said, are those folks who we want to have a part of the community living and engaged in the community, and they're being priced out. Teachers are particularly vulnerable on this point, given fairly modest, stable or modest salaries. Having a dedicated rent-restricted affordable housing supply with these new financing tools as set forth in the bill would be one more set of tools that we could use to attempt to address the crisis. So I hope that you speak favorably of this. We are excited. We've been working with the school district in partnership, looking at a number of sites right now and how we can both move along to support teacher housing, and then obviously how that affects in a positive way student achievement. Thank you.
Thank you. Your next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ted Chandler. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. I am also the Chairman of the National Housing Conference and a founding board member of the California Housing Consortium, and I'm appearing here in support of AB 2200. The Housing Investment Trust is a $5.7 billion mutual fund that invests union pension capital in building affordable housing using 100% union labor. The resources that are available to make workforce housing in California affordable to moderate income people have nearly disappeared in the last few years. The federal home program has been slashed as a result of congressional budget cuts over the last 5 years. And of course, the affordable housing set aside that came with redevelopment funding is now gone. School districts have responded to this crisis of a lack of funding by taking direct action to create affordable housing using the limited resources that are currently available to them. For example, in Los Angeles, LAUSD has entered into partnerships with nonprofit housing developers to build affordable housing on surplus land that's owned by the school district. The first 2 projects that were developed under this initiative have recently been completed, Selma Community Housing in Hollywood and the Sage Park Apartments in Gardena. These projects were built under a long-term ground lease with the school district and used federal low-income housing tax credits to make the rents affordable. The Selma and Sage Park developments give LAUSD employees a priority in leasing the apartments. However, because nearly all teachers earn more than the maximum income limit under the tax credit program, which is 60% of area median income, or maybe $32,000 for a family of 4 in LA, there are nearly no teachers who qualify to live in these affordable apartments. The legislation that you're considering today would provide the vital resources that school districts need to underwrite rents that are less than market rate, but which still permit educators and teachers and other school employees to qualify, unlike units that are built with the low-income housing tax credits. Other California school districts have successfully entered into partnerships with developers to build and rent apartments that are affordable to teachers. For example, in 2002, the Santa Clara Unified School District built Casa del Maestro, which is 40 units of rental housing for teachers. Santa Clara hired a private developer to design and build the development and turn it over to the school district on land owned by the school district, but not restricted by low-income housing tax credit regulations. But because it was built on their land, they were able to write down the rents enough so it's still affordable, and several other districts and community college districts in the Bay Area followed suit. And we are currently working with the City of San Francisco and the school district to help them finance and build rental housing that's affordable to teachers. However, just taking the land out of the equation and just taking the cost of that land by building on school district property isn't enough anymore to make those developments affordable to teachers and many other school employees. There are additional resources that are necessary, such as those that would be provided by the legislation that provided by AB 2200, and that would be available to school districts across the state that are necessary to make these developments affordable. So I urge you to support this legislation. Also in support is the state building trades. Cesar Diaz could not be here, but asked me to note that. And along those lines, I want to note the broader context of the labor movement's involvement in affordable housing beyond the Housing Investment Trust. The labor movement has sponsored and owned 145 affordable housing projects across the country, including 12 in California. They were all built with a skilled and trained workforce that earns a living wage with benefits. And they were built this way not because they were required to, but because a core principle of the labor movement is to create jobs for people in the local community that enable a middle-class career with retirement and health benefits, just like educators, just like our teachers receive their careers. The use of a project labor agreement ensures that the benefits that these arrangements provide, which are flexibility in customizing the financing, protection against work slowdowns and stoppages, and access to a well-trained and efficient workforce. These provisions are also key features of AB 2200, ensuring that school districts and the state's investments in this infrastructure for housing teachers, as important as the schools themselves, are both investments in local community development and are assets for the state and the districts in the long term. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any additional witnesses?
Yes. Good morning, committee members and chair. My name is Michelle McKay Underwood, and on behalf of the Oakland Unified School District, I'm pleased to speak in support briefly of AB 2200. Oakland Unified's #1 goal is to recruit the best talent, create a system that cultivates their growth, and develop a culture that facilitates high retention of effective employees. But districts throughout the state of California are struggling to recruit and retain teachers, and this difficulty is compounded in communities such as Oakland, where the rate of increase in the cost of rental housing is the second highest in the nation, even higher than in neighboring San Francisco. Only 50% of Oakland's teachers live in the city. Half of our employees drive through other school districts that are also looking for high-quality employees on their way to teach in Oakland Unified. AB 2200 establishes a partnership between the state and school district to fund the startup costs of development, which would otherwise be unaffordable to the district. Because of the high demand for teachers statewide, it is easy for prospective employees to choose employment in an affordable housing market, and AB 2200 would help districts like Oakland Unified create affordable housing and once again be competitive in recruiting educators to live in and teach in the community. For these reasons, Oakland Unified is proud to support AB 2200. Thanks Assemblymember Thurmond for his leadership on this issue, and respectfully request your aye vote.
Thank you. Other supporters?
Nicolo DeLuca here on behalf of the cities of San Leandro and Walnut Creek. We want to thank the member for his leadership on this and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Any opposition? Back to the committee. Any questions? Mr. Chow?
When we determine which school district would be qualified under the proposal, what would constitute a high average cost for the recruitment of teachers, and also how do you determine the low retention rate? Are there statistics, national numbers, or whatever that we can use to compare, those numbers with?
Thank you for the question. In start, I also wanted to say, Mr. Chair, I forgot to reflect that we're accepting the committee's amendments. This framework and this bill prioritizes districts that have students, a high percentage of students who are on the free and reduced lunch program in part of the guidelines. It also prioritizes districts that already have access to land and are able to provide, to be able to use the funds to do pre-development and to do the development. And it prioritizes areas that have high economic issues. And if I gave as an example, in one of the school districts, actually many of the school districts in my district, a starting teacher might make something like $40,000. The rents are, as you heard, upwards of $2,500, $2,600 and higher. And many teachers will just flat out tell me, I just can't afford to do it. And so we are prioritizing areas where there's a high rate of students on the free and reduced lunch program, where the school districts already have access to surplus property, and where the costs are very high.
Any other questions? Mr. Stoneworth.
Yes, I want to thank the author, but I have to say, quite honestly, I'm conflicted with this bill. I do recognize that there's a housing crisis, and it is a crisis situation. And I understand the challenges that you're describing in the city of Oakland, and I know that those are shared in many of the urban communities that we have across the state. And recently I read an article, I believe it was in the SACB, about a firefighter that had to drive 4 hours to Silicon Valley where they were able to perform their job. And I mean, that just seems to anybody to be absurd, 4 hours to be able to drive to your occupation. I represent a commuting district. Not everyone, but a good majority of the workforce in my area drive a good 1 to 2 hours to either LA or Orange County every single day. So that is a daily 4 hour windshield time. So I look at this bill and I recognize that we're trying to attempt to make it so that people can live closer to where they work and trying to retain a workforce in those areas, and I respect that. The concern I have is when we specifically call out a particular workforce, teachers and support personnel for teachers, and we don't talk about some of the other workforces that are just as viable and necessary in communities. And I mentioned just firefighters, police officers, nurses, go all the way down through the trades. We mentioned the building trades and different, organizations that are participating in this legislation. The proximity to their workplaces also is extremely valuable. And I do know that we already do have in 2002 the extra credit teacher program that seems to be, very well subscribed to, that really tried to address this issue specifically for teachers back in 2002. I wanted to ask, have we determined that is an inefficient program to try and address this need? So I guess it was a statement followed by a question.
Thank you. As I understand it, districts have essentially been on their own in terms of being able to do teacher housing. It's been the handful of districts that have the resources to do it. Most just do not. But as you've heard today from just one or two districts, having the resources to do it would match up very well with the interest and the need. I appreciate your concern that we not leave out other important employees and employee groups. And I think, while it's not the subject of today's bill, I would mention, by the way, that I do have a bill that is focused on workforce housing that would provide similar grants to cities to be able to support the very people that you said, first responders and people who work in different communities. But before the chair reins me in, I don't want to move too far off of this bill. I would simply say that this is not the whole answer, but it's a step in the right direction. And I would ask respectfully that you not let your concern about how we address the whole problem keep you from supporting something that could be very viable for being how we address part of the problem. The reason that this bill, separate from the other, calls out the need to help teachers is because we know we have a massive shortage of teachers. And if we're not preparing our future, our workforce, we're going to continue to struggle. And until our state has figured out a way to address the many factors that get in the way of recruitment and retention of our teachers, this becomes an important product for doing that addresses both affordability and giving us a chance to close our achievement gap.
Very nice. I had intended to oppose this bill, but having this conversation, I will refrain from voting on this bill so that this bill can continue to move forward as we see it progress. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Thurman, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I appreciate the rigorous discussion here. As I have been sitting in your committee, as you can tell, this is one of the critical issues for our state, the lack of affordability for many. I believe that we need to have a very rich menu of offerings for all Californians, for our most vulnerable who are homeless, to low-income working families, and to working families and individuals who cannot find a product to help them stay in our communities. This one happens to be tied to the success of the children of California, and we've seen in very small examples that these modest investments can go a long way to addressing affordability and promoting better education for the people of California. And for those reasons, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Colleagues, I have a due pass to education recommendation with amendments to be taken up in the Education Committee to accommodate timing issues. I want to thank Mr. Thurman for working with our staff on the committee amendments. I think capping the amounts of each grant to $10 million per project, defining specifically qualified school districts, defining who are the low and moderate income households that would qualify, as well as restricting affordability makes sense. But I also want to just thank you and absolutely agree with the intent of this bill. We've often said in San Francisco until this past year or two that many of our school teachers were moving to Oakland. And unfortunately, in the last few years, those teachers from Oakland who work in our city are now moving much farther, and it has reached crisis proportions, I think, for all of us, and certainly with the waves of retirements that we're seeing in all of our districts, including my mother-in-law this year, who will be retiring from the San Francisco Unified School District public school system. This is a challenge that we are going to have to grapple with up and down the state, and certainly the challenges around housing are exacerbating that as well. So I'm happy to support this. Is there a motion to move this forward? Moved by Ms. Burke, seconded by Mr. Chow. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Motion do pass and refer to the Committee on Education. Shu.
Aye.
Shu, aye. Steinort. Burke. Burke, aye. Chow.
Aye.
Chow, aye. Gaines. Gaines, no. Lopez. Lopez, aye. Mullen. Mullen, aye.
Mr. Thurman, your bill passes and is moved to the Education Committee. With that, members, this concludes our business for the day. Without objection, we'll leave the roll open for a few minutes for add-ons, after which time this meeting will stand adjourned.